Okay, I made a video yesterday explaining that I had some oval port heads that weren't cut out properly. And I'd like to go over a few things with you. This is the cutting system that I use. If you look, it has, I guess for lack of a better description, it's a form cutter. And we call these 3D cutters, and everybody sells them. There's a bunch of different companies that offer these. Mine happen to be some Dart ones that I got right directly through Dart. And this particular one here is a Goodson cutter. Now, we talked about valve jobs and possibly of sinking the valves. Well, you do enough valve jobs on a head and it's going to sink. And you got to remember that these heads are over 30 years old, and originally they were done on probably a multi-spindled machine that did all the intakes and then did the exhaust. And what that means typically is that every guide position can be off a little bit. When you pick up the original hole, there will be some wear, so I adjust my machine for each original wore guide hole, and then I ream, and then I install a guide. Now, everything is referenced off the guide. The guide is the center of the universe as far as the valve's concerned, and everything is based off that. If the guide is crooked, the seat's not going to seal. If the guide's a little bit off and it follows the seat, then it's going to seal. These heads, every one of these guides is not perfect. So when I say a little bit off, that's what I mean, and that's why I adjust the machine accordingly. Now, if you look at this valve here, you'll see that basically it's setting way low. So that means that my seat area up here, it could be down further. So for me to put a form cutting tool, and this just happens to be the exhaust, it'll clean it all up and it'll put the valve in, and you're gonna go up to about here. You're probably not gonna have any sinking issues. You go down further, of course, you're putting the valve in deeper. You obviously don't want to do that, but sometimes you don't have a whole hell of a lot of choice. You're talking about heads that have had valve jobs. Most everything comes in the shop has usually had one valve job. Depending on who did the valve job and how good or how poorly it was, kind of dictates, and guide wear, how much you're going to have to put that valve down in there. If you've got guide runoff, then you know you might be going down a road you don't want to go down. Everything in this business is a decision that you're going to have to make, and as the customer pays for the decisions that you make, or at least I do, I figure out what the customer is willing to afford. Now, in a perfect world, you could put seats in this head, both sides, and you could put them anywhere you want, pretty much. The problem is a lot of times the aftermarket heads usually have more iron in them, and the production heads don't necessarily have a lot of iron in them. Now, these heads are already cut out for a bigger valve they weren't intended for. With a big block, that's usually not too much of a problem, but if you start putting seats in here, you might find out that you don't have as much iron behind the seat as you would like, and that causes all sorts of problems too. So it's always a call, you know, of what you know the customer wants to spend, and you know, and how far you want to go down that road. You know, the thing is you're talking about sunken valves. Well, yeah, you can put sunken valve on anything. I mean, it's a term that kind of, I feel, in this business gets used maybe a little bit too much. We're looking at two sets of heads here. We're looking at a World Merlin head, and we're looking at a GM head. Now that GM head is the head that I just got done doing. I put guides in it, and I cut it for the valves. You can see that the intake, is it down a little bit? Well, it is down a little bit, maybe. I don't consider that sunk. Now, you know, are we splitting hairs? I mean, you know, somebody else might say something else. Well, I don't consider it sunken. The reason why I don't consider it sunk is from this point here, I still can see the valve. It's not buried down in there. Now, did I go into the combustion chamber and did I relieve some of that? I most certainly did. I did this side too. If you look at this one's had maybe a couple valve jobs on it. This is completely sunken. That's factory. The exhaust valve is below the combustion chamber. Anytime it's below the combustion chamber, you know, you could call it sunk. I see a lot of this in the aftermarket world. We just clean the combustion chambers out. So I don't know if that clears anything up, but that's kind of my explanation.